Gabriel Tolan didn't plan to stop at the vendor's stall. He wasn't out for food. He hadn't come to barter. He was only walking. Walking because movement kept his mind from settling into the dangerous silence of memory. Kessenhub Station was full of shadows, but the ones in his head were darker. The market corridors were loud. Neon signage flickered overhead with half-dead bulbs blinking between ads for obsolete tech and hydration packs. People rushed around him, miners, transporters, those too broke or broken to leave. But Gabriel moved slow, deliberate, like a man not afraid of being late to anything. He was about to turn toward the maintenance level when he heard the vendor shout, "Hey thief, that thing just stole from me." Gabriel's head turned. His eyes locked on a small form crouched low behind a stack of expired nutrient packs. A girl, not more than 6 or 7, thin as wire and nearly lost beneath the oversized rags she wore. Her skin was a dusky blue like the twilight before nightfall, hair long, white, tangled, hung like threads of frost around her face. And in her tiny hands, clutched with the desperation of hunger, was a sealed protein bar. She didn't run, she didn't cry. She just stared up at the angry vendor with wide, unblinking eyes. Gabriel didn't think. He stepped forward. "She's with me." The vendor turned. "Since when?" Gabriel reached into his coat and slapped a credit down on the counter. "Since now." The vendor narrowed his eyes. "You logging this?" He gestured toward the camera blinking red above them. Gabriel didn't respond. He was already kneeling beside the girl. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from exhaustion. Gabriel's voice dropped to a low, firm whisper. "Are you hurt?" She didn't answer. Her arms tightened around the bar. Gabriel extended his hand, not forceful, not pleading, just a palm upturned. She didn't take it, but after a pause she stood. No sound, just soft footsteps as she followed him. He didn't take her to the medical bay. Too many questions, too many cameras. Instead, he led her through an old maintenance corridor he once mapped for his own hiding back when he still cared about escaping people. Now it served a better purpose. Behind Logistics Unit 3, behind a forgotten auxiliary door marked condemned, Gabriel had carved out a place. A home if you squinted hard enough. He'd patched the insulation, set up a heat coil salvaged from a derelict shuttle, laid a thin cot on the ground, covered in an old blanket that still held warmth. The girl paused in the doorway. Her eyes flicked from wall to wall like she expected the room to vanish. Gabriel moved to a drawer and pulled out the blanket, thin but clean. He handed it to her. She took it slowly, pressed it to her face. "Is this your home?" she asked, voice barely above the hum of the coil. "It's safe," Gabriel said, "for now." She crossed to the far corner of the room and sat cross-legged. The blanket wrapped around her shoulders, one hand still gripping the protein bar, the other smoothing the cloth against her cheek. Gabriel crouched opposite her. "Do you have a name?" She shook her head, her gaze stayed on the floor. "You don't have to tell me yet." He stood, moved to the small power coil, tried to spark it. Once, twice. On the third try it caught. A soft orange glow spread through the room. Gabriel's eyes flicked back. She was watching him. "She told me not to cry." Gabriel turned. "Who?" "Mama." He knelt beside her. "Where did they take her?" She shook her head, her voice came quieter. "I had to run." She held up a cloth tied around her wrist. It was frayed and smudged with oil but had once been delicately embroidered. A single silver thread still shimmered, shaped like a flower. Gabriel didn't push, not tonight. He returned to the drawer, found a pair of socks, too big for her but better than bare feet on cold gratting. He set them beside her and returned to the cot. Minutes passed. Then from the shadows, "This blanket smells like warm." He didn't laugh, but his voice softened. "Then we'll keep it." She nibbled at the protein bar slowly, carefully, like it might disappear if eaten too fast. She saved half, wrapped it in the cloth and tucked it under the blanket. By the time the station dimmed for night cycle, she'd leaned her shoulder against the wall. The blanket cocooned her knees. Her eyes closed, but before sleep took her, she whispered, "If I stay quiet forever, maybe they'll let Mama come back." Gabriel closed his eyes. He didn't know her name yet, but he knew the shape of what came next. And he wasn't walking away from it. The station never truly slept. Even in its artificial night, Kessenhub pulsed with low machinery groans, flickering lights, the rustle of unseen lives crammed into forgotten corners. Gabriel sat against the cot. The heat coil sputtered but held. Across the room, the girl, he guessed 6, maybe 7 standard years, slept. He knew he couldn't keep her hidden long. Not with the patrol sweeps and sudden inspections that always came unannounced. But tonight she slept. He stared at her for a long time. Her small frame curled under the blanket, one sock halfway off, the other still in place. That protein bar nestled under her arm like a sacred relic. He didn't move, didn't want to disturb it. He remembered that feeling, of finding something so fragile you feared even breath might break it. Her breathing slowed. Then in the half-dark she whispered, "Liaries." Gabriel frowned. What was that? She stirred, didn't open her eyes. "My name," she murmured. He smiled. "Liaries," he repeated. The girl shifted in sleep, a quiet exhale. He sat back. She had given him her name, and with it something deeper than trust. Hope. Kessenhub's morning was no more real than its night. The station's day cycle hummed to life with a shift in lighting and the crackling buzz of power rerouting overhead, but the temperature didn't change. The walls didn't breathe differently. The ghosts didn't vanish just because the hallways were a little brighter. Gabriel woke with a start, not from a sound those never startled him anymore, but from the absence of one. The room was too still. His hand moved instinctively toward the blade tucked beneath the cot, fingers brushing its worn handle as he sat up. But she was there, Lyrie. Curled under the blanket in the far corner, exactly where he'd last seen her, only now her eyes were open, watching him. "You breathe loud when you sleep," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "I'll try to fix that." She stretched her feet toward the heat coil, one sock missing entirely now. Her long hair fell over her face like snowfall. Gabriel reached into the small locker near the door and pulled out a sealed ration. A soft pack of pear gel, nothing fancy, but real fruit, or at least as real as anything got this deep in the station. He handed it to her without ceremony. She took it like it was a relic. "You sure?" she asked. "I'm not much of a pear fan." She didn't smile, but her fingers gripped the pouch tighter. While she ate, Gabriel sifted through a handheld terminal he'd rigged to bypass most of Kessenhub's access protocols. It was old, glitchy, held together by strips of solder and salvaged code, but it still read internal movement logs. "What's Tier 9? Gabriel looked up, wise. Lyrie's gaze had dropped. "That's where they took her mama." Gabriel paused. "Who told you that?" "The men in the coats when they grabbed us. One of them said overflow to Tier 9. Then they separated us." Her voice didn't shake, it was too still for that. Gabriel exhaled through his nose and tapped through the maps. Tier 9 had been officially sealed after a decompression fault 2 years ago. All personnel relocated. No support systems, no active cameras, no life signs. But Kessenhub's records were full of holes, bureaucratic indifference, or something darker. "Do you know what they were doing down there?" he asked. Lyrie shook her head. "I only remember the noise, the alarms, and then singing." "Singing?" She nodded. "Mama used to sing when she wanted me to sleep. I heard her, but not with my ears. Here." She tapped her chest with her palm. Gabriel watched her carefully. "Is that a thing your kind can do?" She blinked. "No, that's a mama thing." He chuckled once softly. Then he stood. "We can't stay here forever." She looked up. "Will they come?" "Eventually." Her hands curled around the empty pouch. "Will you leave me?" Gabriel knelt in front of her. "No, not ever." He meant it more than he meant anything. By midday cycle, Gabriel had mapped 3 alternative routes between the sub-maintenance levels and what was left of Tier 9's perimeter. Most were collapsed, inaccessible. But one, the coolant recycling shaft, had been marked inactive for over 8 months. It didn't even show on some internal schematics. He stared at it on his screen. "You're not supposed to be there," he murmured. "You talk to machines?" Lyrie asked from behind him. He didn't turn, only when they lied. She came closer, sat beside him. Her shoulder barely brushed his, but she didn't pull away. "I can help," she said quietly. "You're helping already." "Not like that. I can hear things, footsteps, drones when they're coming. Mama said I was good at listening." Gabriel looked down at her. "You are." She stared at the map, then pointed. "What's that?" He zoomed in, a blank zone dark in the schematic. "Nothing," he said, "according to the station." "So something. Probably." That night they moved. Gabriel packed the essentials, 3 rations, 2 water vials, a backup heat coil, and the med kit. Lyrie took her blanket and the protein bar she'd saved. They slipped through access corridors like ghosts. Kessenhub's underbelly was full of forgotten tunnels, half-patched leaks, and rusting conduit. But Gabriel knew how to walk without making sound. Lyrie watched him and mimicked his steps, her fingers gripping the edge of his coat when the light dimmed too much. They found the old coolant shaft hidden behind a row of gutted lockers. Gabriel forced the hatch with a manual override and helped Lyrie through first. It was dark, colder than before. Inside, the shaft sloped downward at a shallow angle, debris scattered in places where collapsed walls or broken fans had fallen in. But there was room enough for them to crawl and crouch. They moved slowly, carefully. Midway down, Lyrie whispered, "I hear it again." Gabriel paused. "What?" "She's singing." He didn't hear anything, but he believed her. They reached a small junction node, once an auxiliary control room for cooling systems, now just a dark box with a half-working panel and a single flickering bulb. Gabriel set up their blanket against the wall and turned the heat coil on low. Lyrie sat cross-legged, hands folded, watching him. "Is this where we wait?" she asked. He nodded. "I want to help," she said again. "You are?" She leaned forward. "No, I mean really, I want to find her. I want to go into the dark." Gabriel turned away, busying himself with checking the med kit. "Please," she whispered, "I'm not afraid." He looked back at her. She wasn't begging, she was stating a fact. And it wasn't bravery. It was love. He knelt, met her eyes. "Then you stay here, you watch. If anyone comes, you hide, and if I don't come back." "You will." He didn't answer, just touched her hand. Then he turned back to the access panel, pried it open, and prepared to go deeper. Tier 9 was waiting. And somewhere beneath the lies and the silence, so was her mother. Gabriel crouched at the edge of the panel, one hand on the latch, the other gripping the sidewall for balance. The hatch to Tier 9 creaked open with a reluctant groan that echoed down the shaft like a warning. Cold air met his face, not the kind pumped through life support systems, but something ancient, forgotten, thick with rust and silence. The light from his wrist lamp cut a narrow path down the corridor ahead. It was worse than he'd expected. Cracked tiles, warped plating, and the eerie remains of forgotten signage hung from exposed conduit like broken teeth. The scent of mold and melted plastics lingered beneath the metallic tang of stale air. Tier 9 wasn't dead. It had been buried alive. He stepped inside, careful to keep his weight light. The floor beneath him shuddered faintly, as though unsure whether it could still hold men. He counted steps. 25 paces to the first junction. One door sealed shut, another collapsed inward from a bulkhead failure. A third was newer than the rest, less rusted, more recent weld marks along the frame. Gabriel narrowed his eyes. That wasn't an old door. He ran his fingers along the edge. The seam was magnet-sealed, locked from the inside. He tapped his earpiece, rigged more for short-range comms than anything else, then paused. Lyrie didn't have a receiver. He sighed, they had no backup if he vanished in this hole. Still, he reached into his coat and pulled out a patch-hack disc, slapping it to the panel. A green light flickered, then amber, then green again. The door hissed and opened. He didn't see her at first. The room beyond was dim, flooded only by the weak emergency lights that pulsed from the far end like a heartbeat slowed to the edge of stopping. Gabriel stepped inside. It was cold, bitter cold, not just temperature but atmosphere, like even sound was hesitant to linger here. Then movement. He turned. A figure emerged from the shadow. Not fast, not threatening, just moving, carefully, like every limb had forgotten its weight. She was tall, taller than Lyrie, taller than he expected. Her skin was a dusky green-blue, dulled from time. Her hair, tangled and pale, flowed around her face in waves that caught the light like frost. Her arms trembled at her sides and her bare feet dragged softly over the floor. No restraints. No guards. Just silence. She didn't speak. But her eyes were hollow. Not broken, just emptied. Gabriel took a step forward, then another. He raised both hands slowly. "Sir Evaluan." A flicker, she blinked. He reached for the cloth Lyrie had pressed into his hand, pulled it from his coat pocket, held it out. "Lyrie is safe," he said. "She's waiting." Her mouth moved, no sound came. Then her legs gave. Gabriel caught her before she hit the ground. She was light, too light, her fingers twisted in his jacket with sudden, desperate force. He didn't try to speak again, he simply held her. Getting out was harder. The alarms never sounded, but the station was watching. He could feel it in the temperature shifts, the sudden hum of distant power reboots, the way the corridor lights flickered not in error but in pattern. He carried her through old escape routes, bent conduits, maintenance shafts, a lift shaft he rigged open with a bypass loop. Sir Evaluan Sir never said a word, but she never let go. Her fingers were knotted in his sleeve, her body limp from exhaustion but held together by sheer will. When he reached the upper crawlspace, Lyrie was already at the hatch. She didn't cry out, didn't run, she simply stared. Sir raised her head. Their eyes met, and Lyrie stepped forward. She reached out and touched her mother's face. Sir flinched, but didn't pull away. Then that sound, that hum. Not a word, not a melody with shape, but a vibration, a resonance. Sir opened her mouth, her voice cracked on the edge of silence. Lyrie hummed louder, the same broken lullaby she'd sung in the shadows of their hideout. Sir closed her eyes and hummed back. The air seemed to pulse. Not loud, not glowings. Just alive. Gabriel wrapped Sir in the emergency thermal pad and set her beside the heat coil. Her body trembled beneath the layer, but the color had returned faintly to her skin. Her lips, cracked and dry, moved slowly. Water, she rasped. He handed her a tin cup. She tried to lift it, but her fingers failed. Lyrie took it and guided it to her lips. Sir drank not much, but enough. She leaned back, her eyes shifted to Gabriel. You brought her back. He nodded. You stayed, she whispered. I said I would. Her mouth tried to smile, but it was too soon. Still, the corners moved. Later, when she could sit up without swaying, Sir spoke again. They took the others. Others? Gabriel asked. There were more at first, 12, then 8, then 3. Her gaze grew distant. Then just me. What did they want? Data stress tests, not pain, not directly, they weren't cruel, just indifferent. She paused. No names, just numbers. Gabriel handed her a ration bar. She didn't eat right away. She touched Lyrie's hair instead. You still braid it crooked, she murmured. Lyrie nodded solemnly, you always fixed it. I will again. She looked at Gabriel. You're not one of them. No, you walk like someone who broke things once. He didn't answer. She smiled faintly. Good, I don't need a hero, just someone who knows what broken looks like. Lyrie curled against her side. Sir stroked her hair. Gabriel sat against the wall. No words, but none were needed. They survived the dead tier. Together, and that was the first step. The light in the auxiliary crawlspace was dim, filtered through an old mesh grate from a broken maintenance hatch. Gabriel didn't sleep. He hadn't since the rescue. Instead, he kept vigil near the heat coil, cleaning the blade he'd carried for years and listening to the slow, steady breathing of the two people who now occupied his world. Sir had stopped trembling in her sleep. Lyrie had curled herself so tightly against her mother's side that they looked like one creature wrapped in warmth and threadbare cloth. Gabriel didn't move. He didn't want to wake them. He didn't want to disrupt the fragile quiet they'd stitched together in this forgotten space. But the thought circled in his mind like a virus. This wouldn't last. He needed a plans. Drell was a name he hadn't said aloud in years. A transport hauler, ex-colonial runner, and smuggler who owed Gabriel more than one favor. The man could vanish a soul off a station faster than records could catch up. But contacting him meant tapping a line. And tapping a line meant risking exposure. Gabriel watched the panel flicker under his fingers. He scrambled an old access port in one of the recycling junctions, rerouted the signal through a ghost relay and a blind sector of satellite net. It was slow. It was risky. It was enough. 5 minutes later, a message pulsed back across the cracked screen. 3 bodies, no ID, side bay, egress in 18 hours. Gabriel leaned back, closed his eyes. Then stood. Time to move. Sir was already sitting up when he returned. Lyrie rested her head on her lap, fingers still twined through the edge of the blanket. Gabriel crouched beside them. We have a way out. Sir's eyes sharpened. Where? Drell, maintenance crawler to a colony runner, docked past the western corridor. It's not luxury, but it'll get us gone. Sir looked down at Lyrie. Will it be safe? No place is, but this one's better than most. Lyrie stirred. Can we have Sky? Gabriel smiled. Yeah, that too. They moved in silence. Gabriel took the lead. Sir stayed close behind, one arm around Lyrie. The child didn't stumble. She didn't need to be carried. Her steps were small, but they were hers. They reached the lower transport lifts and climbed 3 levels by ladder, bypassing biometric locks and silent patrols. Gabriel guided them through long-forgotten trade ducts and ventilation shafts. Twice they had to freeze as a security drone passed nearby. Sir pressed Lyrie close and covered her eyes, whispering the lullaby again. Lyrie hummed back. The drone passed. The side bay reeked of oxidized metal and coolant residue. Drell was already there. A broad-shouldered man with one cybernetic arm and a perpetual 5-day beard. He grunted when he saw Gabriel. "Didn't think I'd see you again. Didn't think I'd ask." Drell looked at Sir and Lyrie. "He didn't ask. Bay 4's clear, load up, 3-week jump. You'll have to share space with crates and heat seals." "We've had worse." "I know." He handed Gabriel a small data slug. "Drop this when you hit the edge of the system, kills the trace." Gabriel nodded, "Thanks." "Don't thank me, this makes us even." Gabriel turned to Sir, "We ready?" Sir didn't answer. She walked forward. She placed one hand on Drell's shoulder. "Thank you," she said. And something in the smuggler's face shifted, just a little. "Keep her safe," he said, then walked away. The cargo bay of the crawler was dark, cramped. Heat insulation was patchy, but it held 3 bedrolls, a generator, and a heater core. Gabriel sat on one end, Sir on the other. Lyrie curled between them, already asleep. Gabriel pulled a worn tarp over them. Sir didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "He died before I could leave him." Gabriel turned. Sir stared at the wall, her voice flat. "My bondmate, Lyrie's father, he wasn't cruel with his hands, but silence can be worse. Silence can rot your skin from the inside." I stopped speaking. He didn't notice. She looked down. "I didn't run because I was brave. I ran because I knew I wouldn't survive another season of forgetting who I was." Gabriel didn't interrupt. She continued, "I didn't think I'd get to keep anything, not even her, but you stayed." He reached out, took her hand. She didn't pull away. When they landed at the relay outpost, the 3 of them moved together. A transfer dock, a final jump. They boarded the Arandes, a colony ship bound for a developing zone on a remote world. No scans, no ID checks. Just boarding and silence. Gabriel found them a berth with a view. It wasn't much. A narrow porthole, a bed wide enough for 2, a folding mat for the 3rd. But it was theirs. Sir touched the glass. Stars drifted outside. Lyrie curled against her side. Gabriel watched them both. Sir's hand found his. "You're not asking what I owe you. You don't owe me anything. But I want to give something." She leaned forward. Kissed him. Not out of obligations, but as a choice. A beginning. Lyrie whispered in her sleep, "Is this what home feels like?" They didn't answer. They didn't need to. Because it was. The colony was still in its early breath of life. No cities, no fences, just domes scattered across a valley where the sky opened like a wound made of light. Mountains rose like distant guardians, their peaks wrapped in fog and silence. Wind brushed the wild grass. Water glimmered in shallow lakes untouched by industry. Gabriel stood on the slope behind their new shelter, a half-buried dome no bigger than a supply pod, with a solar tarp stretched across the top and windows that caught the morning sun. He watched it all. The birds, the sway of trees, the steam rising off the lake below. Behind him, Sir stepped barefoot into the grass, her tunic loose around her, hair damp from the basin water. She carried a small bowl of fruit they'd picked the day before. "She named that tree Wiggles," Sir said, pointing to the twisted sapling near the lake. "Said it dances when it's happy." Gabriel smiled. She might be right. Sir handed him the bowl, their fingers brushed. They stood there for a while, not as refugees, not as survivors, but as people who had chosen to stay. Lyrie ran in wide circles through the grass, her laughter skipping like pebbles across water. She had a stick in one hand and a bag of seed pods in the other. Whenever she passed by, she shouted, "I'm making the bugs a parade." Sir sat on a cloth mat at the edge of the lake, combing her hair with a salvaged brush. Gabriel knelt beside her, tying knots in fishing twine for the traps they would set later in the reeds. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. Sir's eyes closed for a moment as the breeze ran across her face. I forgot what sunlight felt like on my shoulders, she whispered. Gabriel looked up. You look like it belongs to you. Her eyes opened. She studied him. You never ask me what I remember. I don't need to. She reached across the space between them and touched his wrist. But if you ever want to ask, you can. That night, Gabriel built a small fire pit outside the shelter. Not because they needed heat, but because flame made the shadows kinder. Lyrie lay stretched between them, belly full of roasted tuber, feet still dusty. She drew shapes in the dirt with a stick and mumbled ideas for numbing clouds. That one's Mr. Wobble, she said, pointing upward. Sir laughed, a sound like old glass warmed in sunlight. Gabriel leaned back, legs stretched out, arm resting behind Sir's shoulders. She tilted toward him just enough to rest her weight there. If we never left this valley, she said, I'd still have more than I ever thought possible. Gabriel turned his head toward her. I'd stay. She met his gaze, then leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't hurried, it wasn't uncertain. It was soft, grounded, and real. Weeks passed. Their dome filled with signs of permanence. Lyrie painted symbols on the walls with plant dye. Sir stitched new tunics from trade cloth. Gabriel fixed a wind catch on the roof and built shelves from driftwood. One evening, Sir stood at the edge of their field, hands on her hips. We should plant something, she said. Gabriel tilted his head. You have a plan. Just hope. That's where the best plans start. They dug shallow rows. Lyrie threw seeds and sang to the dirt. Sir watched her daughter dance barefoot through the soil. Gabriel watched Sir watch Lyrie. That night Sir couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire pit alone, wrapped in a blanket. Gabriel joined her without asking. She didn't speak for a long time. Then I still dream of that cell, of the dark, of humming and hearing no one answer. Gabriel looked at her. Do you want to forget? She shook her head. No, I just wanted to stop hurting. He touched her hand. Then you don't need to forget, you just need time. I wasted so much of it. No, he said, they stole it, but this is yours. She leaned into him, her voice softened. So are you. One morning, Lyrie woke them up before dawn. She pulled Gabriel's hand toward the hill behind their home. You have to see now. He let her lead him. Sir followed, arms wrapped in a shawl. At the top they stood beneath the pale rise of a twin moon. Fog lingered across the valley, but beyond the clouds color was blooming. The sky cracked open with gold. The mountains lit from beneath like fire waking. Lyrie spread her arms. See, the world is waking up. Gabriel knelt behind her, Sir leaned against his side. They watched the sunrise together. And for the first time in years, none of them thought of what they'd lost. Only what they had. Only what they chose. Each other. That evening, as they lay tangled together beneath the soft curve of their sailing, Sir whispered, You raised her like she was already yours, before I even asked. Gabriel stroked her back. She was never a question, just a reason. Sir kissed his chest, curled into the crook of his arm. Then make me yours too, not because I'm broken, not because I need saving, but because you want me. Gabriel touched her cheek. I already did. They kissed again, and when they fell asleep, Lyrie's hand was resting on both of theirs. The fire outside flickered. The stars drifted. And the world asked nothing of them. Because they had finally arrived. Home, the seasons shifted gently in the valley. Rain came not in floods but in whispers, turning the dust to soft earth and painting the grass a deeper green. Flowers the color of old copper grew wild near the edge of the lake. And in the morning, the air carried the scent of wet bark and sun-warmed stone. Gabriel harvested the last row of root bulbs while Lyrie darted between the rows, chasing a beetle that had the audacity to shine. She shrieked when it flared its wings and took flight. Her laughter echoed through the field. Sir watched from the porch. A woven sun hat shaded her eyes and a half-mended tunic lay in her lap. Her fingers worked, but her gaze never left them. Her family. Gabriel wiped sweat from his brow and waved. She raised 2 fingers in return, a gesture they'd made their own. The town center was nothing more than 6 domes, a communal greenhouse, and a message tower that flickered more often than it worked. But it was enough. The settlers came together every cycle to share goods, tools, news, and stories. Lyrie took her paintings, dried leaves with bright animal shapes inked in purple dye. Sir brought bundles of herbs and cloth stitched with fine silver thread. Gabriel, ever quiet, brought tools he'd repaired and extra netting from his lake traps. People smiled when they saw them, not because they stood out, but because they didn't. They belonged. One quiet evening, after Lyrie had fallen asleep clutching a new storybook she'd bartered for with 3 drawings and a pebble shaped like a heart, Sir stepped onto the grass and looked up. The stars were clear tonight, so many more than you could see through any dome. Gabriel joined her. She asked me if stars have names, Sir said. Do they? Not yet, but I told her we could name them together. He looked up then at her. What would you name that one? Sir smiled, hope. Gabriel nodded, then that one is Grace. She leaned against him, and that cluster there. That's Lyrie, all messy and shining and everywhere at once. She laughed, he kissed her temple. And they stood like that until their shoulders grew damp with dew. Lyrie grew. She asked questions, made mistakes, ran too far, fell and got back up. Sir taught her to weave, Gabriel taught her to fish. Together they taught her to listen to the wind and what it whispered before rain. Sometimes Lyrie sat in the middle of the field, hands in her lap, eyes closed. What are you doing? Gabriel asked one day. Waiting. For what? She opened one eye and grinned. Nothing, just wanted to see if it would visit. Sir laughed when Gabriel told her. She's learning the stillness, she said. It's a rare thing in a child. She got it from you. Sir tilted her head. No, Gabriel, she got it from us. One day, Sir stood at the doorway watching Lyrie run through the orchard Gabriel had planted with the help of their neighbors. She touched the doorway like it might drift away. I used to think joy was something people earned. Now I think it's just something you recognize when you see it. Gabriel stepped behind her, arms circling her waist.